times. Hari Bol! Hari Bol! Hari Bol! Hari Bol!
by His divine grace, a Bhaktivedanta Swami, Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Some ladies will come, more ladies will come, more ladies will come and they will need some space. So if you
Okay, everybody's getting
that here.
settled now, right?
Yeah.
Everyone's peaceful and settled and happy, trying to be at least.
Grateful.
Now, would you like to know a secret?
Yes.
You promise to keep it a secret now? One of the things that a public speaker like me does is, in the beginning when we're singing our song Jai Radha Madhava, it's one way to find out who the new people are, because they don't know the words. So I should have thought to project the words so you could have at least followed the words. And my apologies to our friends over here in the corner that you're guests and we're honoring you as guests, and some other people over here. So, but don't tell anybody, it's a secret. But that's the topic that I'd like to speak about needs a little introduction for those of you that are a little bit new. Those of you that are a little bit new, I'm looking over there. Wherever you're from, thank you for coming. Are you familiar with the Bhagavad Gita? In the back there? Not at all. Okay. Krishna is the speaker of Bhagavad Gita. Bhagavad Gita is the kind of ABC literature of this vast body of Vedic wisdom. The word Veda, the Sanskrit word, means knowledge. Just to make it really simple. Just like a university has different departments of study. Big universities, many departments of study, and big universities have a big library. There's many different branches of literature in that library. The Vedas is like that library. And any branch of knowledge that you can think of, there's a portion of the Vedas that deals with architecture, music, science, history, medicine, sociology, and whatever else you can think of. There's a branch of the Vedas that deals with all forms of knowledge, and there's something that's common with all of those different branches of knowledge. They have a central uniting theme, and that is elevation consciousness of the person who takes part in life and is guided by the Vedas in taking part in life towards awakening of the higher consciousness of the soul within, the living entity, towards different stages of higher consciousness, and ultimately reaching, according to Bhagavad Gita, the purpose of all the Vedas is to know Krishna. And Krishna is the name of that which is the source of everything. According to the Vedas, the absolute truth is defined as that from which everything comes. Very simple definition. There's everything, and there's the source of everything, and there's not a third thing. That which is the source of everything, that's the absolute truth, and the purpose of the Vedas is to realize that. That which is the source of everything, and according to Bhagavad Gita, that which is the source of everything is Krishna. And not only Krishna is declaring it, but other authorities are referred to accepted, very ancient authorities are referred to as the source of everything. Krishna is the source of everything. And they're different. The Bhagavad Gita, one can describe it this way, it's a study of consciousness, or the yoga system that's for the purpose of elevation of consciousness to that ultimate destination, realization of the source of everything as the Supreme Person. And that's the ABC literature, or undergraduate study, Bhagavad Gita, spoken by Krishna. And then the graduate study has the same principles as the undergraduate study, but it takes the undergraduate study principles and expands upon them and gives them further clarity. And one of the main things that it does is it gives examples of those principles through histories of real people that did real things and had an exhibition or demonstration or display, they're like role models of that higher consciousness, or consciousness of the source of everything, Krishna. And what I've been doing when visiting so far in some homes and also our Farmington Hills Center is speaking about one of those personalities described in this post of the graduate study literature called Srimad Bhagavatam. That's the first of 12 cantos. It sits on your shelf like this. It's a big literature. 18,000 verses with commentary. So, one of those persons is Bhishmadeva, and he's described in Canto 1, Chapter 9. So what I was thinking to do is, having already explained who is he in one class, and then his role in Farmington Hills, his role in the Kurukshetra battle for our newer guests. Bhagavad Gita is part of a big epic called Mahabharata, the history of greater India, and it's a treatise on right and wrong, or good conduct. In simple terms, the good guys and the bad guys, the antagonist and the protagonist, and the antagonist, the good guys, protagonist, the good guys, they model virtue. And then the bad guys, they model the opposite of virtue. And there's a conflict between those two groups. And through narration of history, there's examples of good conduct and bad conduct, and discussion about how you decide what is to be done, what is not to be done in different circumstances of life. It's very meaningful in that sense. And it's an actual history. And then literally right in the middle of that, kind of like a sandwich, in the middle part of the sandwich, is this Bhagavad Gita that teaches beyond good and bad, or morality and immorality, or virtue and sin. There's, what's the goal of all of this anyway? Is the goal of all of this to achieve another temporary elevated situation called in the Vedas Swargaloka, or companion idea in many spiritual teachings is heaven, as opposed to the bad place where bad people go, to hell. And we're in this middle region, so is it simply go to the good, we do good and prosper and go to the good place after this life? Or is it more than that? And Bhagavad Gita is very clear in multiple places. More than that is to attain the eternal kingdom of God, which is not the same as heaven. There's an important distinction. So, Bhagavad Gita discusses that, and the Srimad Bhagavatam describes people who have that consciousness. They have attained it, they live their lives accordingly, and Bhishmadeva was one of them. according to the text of Srimad Bhagavatam, one of the specific qualifications of Bhishmadeva is he is recognized as one of 12 Mahajans, great souls, Mahajana, Yena Kata Sapanta. He's one of the 12 great personalities. And he knows, and he knows, and he speaks, and he shows by his example what's the goal, what's the real standard of higher consciousness or proper conduct, and the purpose of that proper conduct. So I was thinking that I would just read some of the verses at the beginning of this 19th chapter. So Bhagavad Gita is in the middle of this epic, and following Bhagavad Gita there's a big battle. It takes 18 days, and the bad guys lose, and the good guys win. Virtue prevails over vice, and they're assisted by Krishna in various interesting ways, and they prevail. By lawfully, according to tradition and culture, they were to become the next king. The tussle was over. We want to become king, and we want to bump you guys off. We give the good guys, and they tried so many ways, attempted murder, and it didn't work out. So, after the Kurukshetra battle, this 18-day battle, Kurukshetra is an actual place. It's not far from New Delhi, and it's a holy place where this battle took place. And after the battle was completed, those who were deceased, funerals were performed for them. The rightful king became installed as the king. And the general, grandfather Bhishma, he was a great personality as a devotee. He was a great personality as a knower of Dharma, or right and wrong, proper conduct. And he was something of a mystic. That is to say, he had been given a benediction, this power, that not that his body wouldn't get old, but he wouldn't have to leave his body until he chose to leave his body. Even if it was like uninhabitable, he could still stay until he chose to leave. So his body became uninhabitable. At the end of the Kurukshetra battle, his body was riddled with so many arrows that it's described he was lying on a bed of arrows. And in the painting, there's Krishna on our left, and the brothers, Yudhishthira became the king, and he had 4 other brothers, and they came to see their grandfather, Bhishma, lying on the bed of arrows in the midst of this battlefield. And I was thinking, I'll just read some of these texts and describe it a little bit. It's very nice to read and to hear the text of Srimad Bhagavatam. It's purifying, even if you don't know who all these personalities are, the names and things. So it's the sound vibration, because it's in relation to Krishna, the absolute truth. The sound vibration is elevating and purifying, beneficial. So here we go. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. 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 The speaker speaker is Sutta Goswami, and he's speaking to an assembly of sages after the fact. It's an historical narration. Sutta Goswami said, "Being afraid for having killed so many subjects on the battlefield of Kurukshetra, Maharaj Yudhishthira went to the scene of the massacre. There, Bhishmadeva, pictured in the middle here, was lying in a bed of arrows, about to pass away. At that time, all his brothers followed him on beautiful chariots, drawn by first-class horses decorated with gold ornaments. With them were Vyasa." Now, for our new people, it's going to be a list of names, like a who's who of VIPs on the planet at the time. You don't know these people, but and I'm not going to take the time because it'll take a lot of time. But in the commentary of these texts, it explains who these people are. Vyasadeva is the compiler of all the Vedas. Before he compiled the Vedas, they were present through sound, passed on by oral tradition from teacher to student, who then became proficient and then became a teacher who gave to his students and so on. It was passed on in that manner. And then at a certain time, Vyasadeva took that which was spoken, put it in a written form, and he divided it into different sections to make it more easy to understand for our modern audience. But it's the same texts, just put in different departments. With them were Vyasa and rishis like Domya, the learned priest of the Pandavas, and others. O sage amongst the Brahmanas, that's Sutta speaking to this assembly. Lord Sri Krishna, the personality of Godhead, also followed, seated on a chariot with Arjuna. Thus, King Yudhishthira appeared very aristocratic, like Kuvera, surrounded by his companions, the Guyakas. So, what was understood by the Pandavas, Pandavas means the 5 brothers who became the rulers of the world, headed by their elder brother Yudhishthira. The Pandavas knew their grandfather very well, intimately well, lovingly well, and they knew that in his heart of hearts he wanted very much for the Pandavas to rule the world, not the bad guys, not the Kauravas, this party that would do anything just to get their ends achieved without any consideration of the means justifies the ends. The ends, excuse me, the other way around. The ends justify the means. So, they knew that Bhishmadeva wanted them to rule the world. And so, purposefully, they came in royal attire, wearing crowns and the ornaments of royalty, because Bhishmadeva didn't see the coronation. He was flying on a bed of arrows while all that was going on. So it was like visually making the statement that that which was cherished by your heart is now fulfilled. Please be happy. And that just by coming in that manner with royal chariots, decorated horses, all the fanfare and all of that, they wanted him to be happy in that way. Another nice painting where grandfather Bhishma has got a lot of arrows in his body. In the center, that's Krishna. And by the other 5 personalities is the 5 Pandavas. the crown over here on his lap, that's the elder brother Yudhishthira, and then the other 5 brothers, the other 4 brothers. And Grandfather Bhishma is going to speak, but before he speaks, he is going to be received by all these visiting personalities in honor of his passing, his departure from this world. Lord Krishna came, Yudhishthira came, seeing Bhishma lying on the ground like a demigod fallen from the sky. The Pandava king Yudhishthira, along with his brothers and Lord Krishna, bowed down before him. He's their grandfather. Krishna is a cousin of the Pandavas, so he didn't literally, literal grandfather, but more or less figurative grandfather. Certainly the kind of personality within the royal family. Just to see the chief of the descendants of King Bharata, or Bhishmadeva, all the great souls in the universe, namely the rishis among the demigods, brahmanas and kings, all situated in the quality of goodness, were assembled there. Now, the next verse is a list of, it's a who's who, the guest list. Parvat Muni, Narada, Domya, Vyasa, the incarnation of God, Brihadvasa, Bharadwaj, Parashuram, and disciples Vashishta, Indra, Pramada, Trishta, and so on. And lots of pages if you want to understand who these personalities are, there's little biographical sketches. And many others like Shukadeva Goswami and other purified souls, Kashyapa and Angirasa and others, all accompanied by the respective disciples, arrived there. It's a big assembly, who can imagine. Now, here is Bhishma lying down in a, not in his normal circumstance to receive guests. And a cultured person, it's a very important part of culture to receive guests. But despite his circumstance, Bhishmadeva welcomed the Lord and great devotees within his heart. This is Prabhupada's comments. Expert religionists know perfectly well how to adjust religious principles in terms of time and place. So although he couldn't move, and the procedures you customarily would follow to receive someone, and an honored guest, those he couldn't do. But with his words he could do, with his heart he could do, with his eyes he could do, and they were perfectly satisfied. Because he was a knower of good culture and good conduct, and he exhibited it even in this very compromised situation. And there's a fair amount of discussion in the commentary about how important it is to receive guests, and specifically how to receive a seeking person. And it has something to do, besides culture has everything, when it's applied properly, has everything to do with manifesting higher consciousness and making one's heart open to receive yet higher consciousness for the words of this exalted person that you're receiving, this saintly person or qualified person. So he had all this assembly of great souls, and his heart was open, and his words and character made them completely satisfied. Lord Sri Krishna is situated in everyone's heart. Yet he manifests his transcendental form by his internal potency. This very Lord was sitting before Bhishmadeva, and since Bhishmadeva knew his glories, he worshipped him duly. Now, he could have left his body whenever he wanted, but part of what he wanted is he wanted to personally see the form of Krishna as he was giving up his body. So Krishna knew that, and being reciprocating with the desire of his pure devotee, Krishna came. And as he came, Bhishmadeva knew what he was doing and why he was doing that, and his heart, he truly worshipped him. The appearance of Lord Krishna at the deathbed of Bhishmadeva, this is Prabhupada's commentary, the purport, is due to his being an unflinching devotee. In the painting, you'll see Arjuna with his bow drawn, and he was feeling very compassionate that Grandfather Bhishma must be thirsty. So Arjuna was like really expert with bowmanship, and he fired an arrow in the ground in such a way that he hit a reservoir of water, and the reservoir of water made a water fountain and poured water into the mouth of Grandfather Bhishma, so his parched throat was clenched. Service to Grandfather Bhishma with the skill that Arjuna had. The sons of Maharaj Pandu were sitting silently nearby, overtaken with affection for their dying grandfather. Seeing this, Bhishmadeva congratulated them with feeling. There were tears of ecstasy in his eyes, for he was overwhelmed by love and affection. So, the sons of Pandu is how they're being referred to here. They were young boys when their father died. And when the father was deceased, the grandfather became the father of the grandchildren. So he, Bhishma, was acting as the father, and raised and taught and trained and did everything. He was the father for these 5 strapping young boys that were eventually going to rule the world, and he had such affection for them. Now take a look at the painting here, the image of Grandfather Bhishma. He probably had some pain, but he was a mystic who was able to go beyond his pain, and seeing the circumstance of the 5 brothers, he began to cry out of compassion for them. And I find it very wonderful. His first thought is to think of the discomfort and misfortune of these 5. Not, looking for a sense of empathy or, do something to take away some of the pain I'm feeling. Please remove some of the arrows or something. Give me a pain tablet. He's thinking of, compassionate, thinking of the brothers and their mother. Bhishmadeva said, "Oh, what terrible sufferings and what terrible injustices you good souls suffer for being the sons of religion personified. You did not deserve to remain alive under those tribulations, yet you were protected by the Brahmanas, God, and religion." So, sometimes, there are many lessons in all of this, and it's easy to spend lots of time speaking of the lessons, but here's one that I like especially. Sometimes, or more than sometimes, we find ourselves in some difficulty or some tribulation, something that's uncomfortable or misfortune or some hardship, and exactly what's behind the background, behind that hardship, we don't really know sometimes, or we may think we know, and there's actually it's something else, some kind of misdeed in the past, and we're now reaping the fruit of some past misdeed of the past. But we don't know. What is it exactly? So before the battle, Yudhisthira, along with others, were very reluctant to go forward with the battle. Because, yes, I'm the rightful heir to the throne, and yes, our cousin brothers, these bad guys, they did so many bad things. But you know, Duryodhana, he's a good ruler, he's doing a good job, and let him just sail on, and we don't want some conflict here. So, in other words, he wasn't ambitious for power and victory and all those things. He wasn't that kind of a person. He was a virtuous person. And he was prepared to place virtue above everything else, and above his own self-interest. But circumstance was such that the battle happened anyways. Like, there's a lot of detail of how the battle happened anyway. So the battle happened anyways. And after the battle, he was feeling terrible. He was feeling, so that I can become king, this awful event took place and so many people died. I feel horrible. And he was very sad, despondent. And different people tried to pacify that despondency and help him, not like, hey, get over it, Yudhisthira. Nothing worked. Even Krishna purposely tried to pacify his heart, and it was unsuccessful because Krishna wanted his dear devotee, Bhishmadeva, to do the honors. Purposefully, he orchestrated it like that. And his pacifying words are, when some misfortune, this is a nice lesson for us, when some misfortune comes your way, here's one thing that you should do. Consider the action that you have taken, you're feeling some discomfort about. Was it done according to the principles of Dharma, the codes of religion, the scriptural teachings that tell us what is proper conduct? And if it was being done, was it being done under the guidance of a qualified Brahmana or Vaishnava? And if you check the box on those two, then were you doing those things under proper guidance for the purpose of pleasing Krishna, for the purpose of God's service only, not some selfish service? So if you need to correct any one of those three things, that's where your attention should go. But if you've done those three things, the results of your work is entirely out of your hands. Our department is the service department to serve Krishna according to the codes of Scripture, under the guidance of qualified persons for His pleasure. That's service is our department. And the results, it's Krishna's department. So if you need to do any course correction, do it in terms of those three things. But the flow of events that take place, that's up to Krishna. And in your case, Yudhisthira, you followed theistic conduct. You did so under the guidance of qualified persons. And you were only interested in the satisfaction of Krishna. So you have no cause for lamentation. You are protected by those three principles. There's a nice saying, those of you from India you know, Dharma Rakshata Rakshataha. Dharma Rakshataha. Raksha means protection. Those who protect Dharma are protected by Dharma. And then the opposite is true. So Yudhishthira, you're protected. Difficult circumstances, and shortly he's going to name some of them. Difficult, such great difficult circumstances, most people would not even been able to survive. But in all of those circumstances, you're protected. You not only survive, but you most surely must feel that you have the sense of being protected by Dharma, by the qualified souls, and by God Himself. You survive because of those protections, because you live and abided by those principles in your life. Now, what's he doing here? He's seeing the pain in the heart of Yudhishthira, because he knows Yudhishthira, Yudhishthira knows him. He's in a lot of pain, but he's thinking of the pain of Yudhishthira. He knows exactly how to touch his heart, because he's a person who lives by principle. He knows Yudhishthira. That's his nature. And he touches that nature and comforts it. You've been always protected because you live by those principles. It's very nice. Instruction to help us when we're experiencing some hardship or some difficulty. In terms of circumstance, but look more at the character and the quality by which you have been leading your life, not just the circumstances out there. The field of activities in the language of Bhagavad Gita. And does it look, how does it look, the field of activities, the outcome? Look at the consciousness of how you conduct your life. And do your aligning and adjusting on that side, if need be. As far as my daughter-in-law Kunti is concerned, so Kunti is the mother of these 5 brothers. So as far as my daughter-in-law Kunti is concerned, upon great General Pandu's death, Pandu's the father of the Pandavas, she became a widow with many children, and therefore she suffered greatly. And when you were grown up, she suffered a great deal also because of your actions. You know, your mother who was as dear to you as your life, she's been through so much tribulation also. But she has also been protected by the same principles of life. In my opinion, this is all due to inevitable time, under whose control everyone in every planet is carried, just as the clouds are carried by the wind. So, back to Bhagavad Gita. Bhagavad Gita, according to the commentaries, there's 5 main subject matters in Bhagavad Gita. One of them is time, and here's the other 4. The living entity, the soul, God, the controller of living entity, and material nature. And then the other one is karma, or activity. Souls involved with material nature makes activity under the supervision of God. And then there's laws that are governing that, and the laws of karma. And then there's this mysterious 5th factor of time. And one day I'll give a seminar on time. I love the topic. But very simply, time is not just, there's a measure of time. There's a clock up there and it's 5 minutes to 6. And so it tells minutes and hours and tick, 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 seconds. And there's other ways of measuring time. What's time? Who's seen time anyways? I mean, you see measures of time. Well, what is it? What's that thing that you're measuring? And according to Bhagavad Gita, and here it's right in this teaching of Bhishmadeva, it's a Shakti, a power of God that moves matter. So we don't so much think about life that way. Here we are, we're assembled, and it's, now it's 4 minutes to 6. And some time ago we were someplace else, and some time we're going to disperse and be some other place. And right now we're where we are. So in order for events to happen, you need time. And it's not just like measures, but it's a potency. It's a potency of God. Time, energy, Kala Shakti, is an energy of God that moves stuff, without which stuff doesn't move. And what Bhishmadeva is the graduate study of the undergraduate study, is how time has moved events. He's stating his learned opinion, the wise Bhishmadeva is saying, mysterious events, how you have suffered, how your mother has suffered, inexplicably, because you're all good people, not only good people, you're such elevated persons and you've had to undergo such. The only explanation is time energy. Time has moved stuff to create situations that look horrible. Normal persons wouldn't survive and you survive. So that's also the time energy acting. You were protected. The difficulty was caused by time. The relief of that difficulty was caused by time. And time is an energy in Krishna. It made things look like they were coming to a close and then it opened up again. Time energy is very flexible. It can move according to the indication of the one directing time. It's a really nice topic. Really nice topic. In this Srimad Bhagavatam, there's a whole chapter dedicated just to time. And I'm tempted to go there because I like the topic so much, but I'll control myself. I'll go back to Bhishmadeva. It's fascinating. Oh, how wonderful is the influence of inevitable time. It is irreversible, otherwise how can there be reverses? In the presence of King Yudhisthira, the son of the demigod controlling religion, Bhima, the great fighter with the club, and the great bowman Arjuna with his mighty weapon Gandiva, and above all the Lord, the direct well-wisher of the Pandavas. There's only one explanation. His time energy moves stuff. And here we are. And he's speaking the names of these grandchildren of his with such affection. That how are they feeling? They're looking at him in this condition going, and he's looking at them going with tears in his eyes of affection for them. And how wonderful it is that you've been protected through hardship, that you were put into hardship and protected at the same time. How wonderful it is. O King, no one can know the plan of Lord Krishna, even though great philosophers inquired exhaustively, they are bewildered. In the assembly of so many great philosophers, and rishis and yogis, and they don't know. So, Yudhisthira, don't try to figure it out. Here's one thing, and just now I'm going to end because of tell him and then make a little request. One thing is clear. Krishna wanted you to rule. That's how things worked out, because that's what Krishna wanted. Yudhishthira, that's what Krishna wanted. Please, rule. Carry out your prescribed duty for the pleasure of Krishna. Everyone is waiting. Please go forward, give up your lamentation. Carry out the will of Krishna. And because what he's speaking is true, and because he was speaking with such purity, his truth with such purity, it completely changed the heart of Yudhishthira. His grief went away, just like darkness is dissipated by light. Which is stronger? Light or darkness? Think. Turn on the light inside the heart of Yudhishthira, who's now just hearing the darkness went, he's ready. Just by sound vibration, with purity, with great affection, with great compassion. He's not thinking, he's not a self-interested person, although he could easily whine and complain about the difficulty of the circumstance. It's not what he did. It's not his consciousness, it's not his character. And so, Yudhishthira accepting the direction given by his grandfather, he then does something that the circumstance really wasn't so good. He said, "Can you explain to me how I can carry out my duties as the king?" Like, can you give a nice Bhagavatam class for a little while, please? It's not really the best circumstance. But he had such affection and on and on and on. So wonderful instructions, very wonderful instructions, how to live your life. Whether you're a leader or a follower, or just a general citizen, how to lead your life that leads to this higher consciousness condition. Either way, wonderful instructions. And then the final section of this chapter 9 is the sun starts making a movement in the northerly direction. There's like some details about Vedic astronomy and astrology, because they connected. There's a movements of the sun. As the sun is moving in a northerly direction, then yogis know that you can go to the kingdom of God to Vaikuntha. So that's what he chose to leave. So he withdrew consciousness from his Bhagavatam class, and he invested consciousness in achieving Krishna's association eternally. He fixed his eyes on Krishna and withdrew his senses, pratyahara, from the activities of this world and concentrated his thought on Krishna and left. What a very wonderful chapter. I wanted to read the beginning part to encourage you all to read the rest. And in fact, regularly reading Srimad Bhagavatam is it's so wonderful. It acts at the heart level. It's not just information. It's a transformation of heart, just by sound. Very powerful medicine that cures the soul of misgivings and circumstances, and how we react to circumstances in a material way, but we have the option of relating to circumstances of life in a way where we're conscious of the source of everything and living our lives that way. The Bhagavatam has that power to take us there. It's wonderful literature. So please take some time to read this section. It's a wonderful section. For that matter, read regularly. Thank you. Prabhupada ki jai. Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. You have a question? Please. Do you need a microphone or you have a good strong voice? Okay.
You see, devotees like Dhruva Maharaj, Prahlad Maharaj, doing a lot of devotional service.
Yeah.
But we don't hear much about Bhishmadeva doing a lot of devotional service.
You don't hear about which?
We don't hear much about Bhishmadeva doing a lot of devotional service.
Yeah, well, you have to.
No, we don't hear a lot in the Bhagavatam as well.
Well,
Why is he considered as Mahajan?
it's right in the first canto.
But still,
Give Vyasadeva a break, come on. And you want to read a lot about him, go to Mahabharata, there's a lot about him.
no, but if you look at his total
I understand your question. It's there. You know, it's there. It's, he's a great devotee. He's one of the Mahajans.
I'm trying to understand why. After reading Bhagavatam,
You keep asking the same question, I'm giving you the same answer. You're not happy. What am I going to do if you're not happy?
Any specific reason?
Vyasadeva chose, that's all.
That's it.
The portion of Krishna's life that finds its way into the Bhagavatam has already, the sections of Bhishmadeva's influence was largely covered in Mahabharata. And the teachings of Bhishma's activities and what he said and so on is in that literature. Now, it's touched upon, but not exhaustively written upon in the Bhagavatam. Although he is one of the Mahajans, one of the great authorities. But, for example, we hear about Dhruva's activity to become perfected, but we don't hear so much about what Dhruva said afterwards, do we? Why not? He was a great soul. Why not? Oh no, why not? What's the reason? Because there was Vyasadeva chose to expand on how someone who has strong attachment for the material can come to the detachment from the material and total absorption in the transcendental spiritual. That's what he chose to speak about with Dhruva. There's lots of other things that happened. He became king. We don't hear so much about it. He ruled for a long time. 60,000 years he ruled. We don't hear a whole lot about it. We hear a little bit when he got angry when his stepbrother was killed. And what happened with that thing. But there's a certain lesson. So Vyasa was choosing to select lessons that are helping us to get to the stage of Shuddha Bhakti, pure devotion. That's what he is. Ask Vyasadeva.
And you also told that.
Don't ask the same question.
No, it's a different question.
The real irony seems to be that he's such a great soul and yet he's fighting as an enemy against Krishna. So can you explain how that is?
Sure. Did you hear his question?
No.
Vyasadeva was a great devotee of Krishna. Excuse me, Bhishmadeva was a great devotee of Krishna. Bhishmadeva was a great, and he fought on the other side. Can you explain that? That's the question. Sure. Here's a real simple one. Krishna ratio. The time factor. But here's some more detail. We discussed this in Farmington Hills, but it's a nice topic. According to, and now thinking specifically of our guests that are new to all of this, according to the devotional texts, every living entity has an eternal relationship with God. And those relationships are of different loving quality. There's neutrality, there's servitorship, there's friendship, there's parental affection towards God, and there's conjugal affection towards God. And as above, so below, we find those things here because it's there. As above, so below. So the eternal relationship that Bhishma had, not only he's a devotee, but his mood of love is a servant, dasya. So that makes it even stronger. He's a servant, and he's taking the opposite side of Krishna, and Krishna's dear devotees, his grandchildren, who were attempted murder many times against them by the fellows who he's on their side in battle. And the answer is a rasa answer. One of the answers, there's many. That is, there's 5 primary relationships, and there's 7 secondary rasas. And the 7th, when there's a secondary rasa, the science is, sometimes it becomes very prominent, so much so that it seems to eclipse the primary. The primary is still there, but the mood of the secondary becomes so prominent that you don't even necessarily see the primary. So one of the secondary rasas is chivalry, combat, competition, contest, in a loving mood. There's the reflection is not in a loving mood. That's the below part. But in the above part, there's this, like the cowherd boys, and they would, chivalry, even they were friends. So Bhishmadeva took the other side to fulfill the desire of Krishna for combat. But who can combat him like anybody like Bhishma? So when Bhishma was firing arrows at Arjuna, his dearmost friend Krishna would get in the way. So the arrows would strike him. And Krishna was feeling, Now, if somebody else fired an arrow, it would be, But coming from this loving devotee Bhishma, was, from nectar of devotion, Prabhupada writes, it's like a lover and beloved, and sometimes in a loving mood, the lover will make a love bite, and the beloved goes, If somebody else bites them, slap. But in a, it was to fulfill a happiness of Krishna. He took that position. And it was for other reasons. Prabhupada writes another one of the reasons. Krishna wanted to show, no matter who you are, even you're this exalted personality, Bhishma, if you don't give protection to women, finished. Because he could have, but he didn't give protection to Draupadi, finished. Krishna wanted to show that. So he was seeing Bhishma as the example. Finished. Yeah.
It really seems to reveal the magnanimity of Krishna himself, to show how that even acting as an enemy, he's bringing out the good qualities that come about Krishna under the glass.
Yeah. At the end, somebody may have some bad thoughts. Oh, Grandfather Bhishma, he was fighting on the wrong side, and Grandfather Bhishma was trying to kill Arjuna, and he's a bad person. So Krishna wanted to show the exaltedness of Grandfather Bhishma. Even in his presence, he could do what Krishna couldn't do. How dear is Bhishma to me? And how dear did Bhishma hold Krishna to him? Yes?
How the Srimad Bhagavatam describes time sounds very similar to quantum physics that
Yes.
we have just been skimming the surface of within the last 100 years in the West. thousands and thousands of
Yes.
years ago. So therefore, can you present your course here at the...
Well, maybe sometime. Now, I've been thinking about developing some deeper thought, but on topics like this, Sariputta has been kind of, the inspiration, one of the main inspirations behind deeper subjects that deal with, reality and science as we know it. One of the last topics that he was involved with before he left was time. And it's one of my projects to do, is go through all the recordings that he made on the topic of time. And my experience is they're way up here, and you have to listen to them at least 10 times to get them, so it's like a little bit intelligible, so that I can understand what the message is, and then repeat the message to people that are, not used to hearing it 10 times. Because it's abstract and subtle. But I'll take your request to heart, and one of these days. I've got some projects that are more in the front burner than that one, but it's a project that's dear to me. Yes, sir.
Would you all, since you went there with the quantum physics and science, how they try to manifest it in these terms nowadays, would you also correlate dark energy?
Which energy?
Dark energy.
Dark energy.
Well,
I don't know much about it.
Dark matter, dark energy.
I don't know much about it. Sorry.
Oh.
I can't talk about that topic because I don't know much about it.
Okay.
And probably, I'm sure there's some people that do, but I'm not one of them. So I don't like to talk about things I don't know about.
Right,
I
understood.
pretend I know about them and say something foolish. Okay. Looks like we're done. You got something else? Can you just ask it once time though, but not 5 times? Do me a favor. Okay.
Time is the cause of all the misfortunes and this.
Time energy?
Time energy.
Is time the cause of all misfortune?
No, time is the cause of all the
Is time the cause of what?
Misfortune.
misfortunes.
Misfortune.
And
No.
also said
It's a factor. It's not the cause. There's 5 factors to action. And time isn't the cause. Okay? It was a trap. I saw the trap. Yes.
Bhishma knew that Lord Krishna is the Bhagavan.
Could somebody assist our guests that came and make sure that they're taken care of?
We have a guest services team.
Okay,
So,
okay,
yeah,
okay.
they give them a tour.
Okay, fine. I'm sorry.
Yeah, Bhishma knew that Krishna is Bhagavan, but still he waited for the sun to go to the north position to leave his soul. But
Yeah.
he knew that Krishna is in front of him, but still
He didn't need it.
Oh, he
He
didn't
didn't need it.
Yeah.
Come on. He's like, going to Krishna no matter what. Read carefully. I'm sure you do read carefully. Read carefully in chapter 8 of Bhagavad Gita, where Prabhupada says exactly that. For the devotee, the yogi needs da-da-da. For the devotee, they don't need da-da-da. But Grandfather Bhishma followed it anyway. Because he was a great soul, showing by example, and so he did what he did. But he didn't need to do that. He was just showing by example. He's very kind.
What was his relationship with Kunti?
Relation with what?
With Kunti.
What about
With
Kunti?
Mother Kunti?
I know about her. What's your
What
question?
was his relationship?
Related, how was he related with Mother Kunti?
Okay. You want the family relationship. How did it work?
Family relationship.
Okay. I get mixed up with these things, you know, with family trees and stuff. And let me see if I can. Grandfather Bhishma's father was Santanu, right? Santanu and Ganga. Santanu and Ganga. He was their son. Devavrata became Bhishma, right? You with me? And then Santanu had a second wife. Her name was Satyavati. Okay? Satyavati had 2 children, Chitrangada and Vichitravirya. Chitranga and Vichitravirya did not have children. The wives of Chitranga Vichitravirya survived beyond him. And so over here is Bhishma, and over here is Vichitravirya's wives. Vyasadeva, who was also a brother, because Satyavati was the father of Vyasa. Now we have the Pandavas, Pandu, Dhritarashtra, and Vidura. Right? Now, Pandu had sons with Kunti. And Kunti was the sister of Vasudeva, who was Krishna's father. So Krishna is related, the Pandavas are related, Kunti is related as the wife of Pandu, who was the son of Amba and Ambika. And so, and their sons, Vichitravirya's wives, their sons that were brothers of Bhishmadeva. Oh, it's actually his great-grandson. But she was a granddaughter in family relation with Bhishmadeva.
Right.
Now, for our new people, it's like, what moves on all of that now? but there's a nice family tree slide in what I presented on Friday evening. And just, that's it. That's a verbal explanation. The visual one also helps.
That's good.
That was the last question. I can do any more of those. Srila Prabhupada ki, Srimad Bhagavatam ki, Ora Himandi